Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Reacteria. Today, we're going to be looking at this video called Dinosaurs and the Bible Creation Questions by World Video Bible School. Now, true fans of this channel might recognize that name, as World Video Bible School produced the first video that we ever reacted to in this series, 6 Reasons Not to Believe in Evolution. And when I think back to that old video, I sometimes wonder how I might handle things differently now, after 3 years of doing Reacteria has aged and jaded me in ways that I never thought possible. So let's see if our old friend Kyle is up to his same dishonest antics in this video that was released just last year. Thank you so much to my patrons on Patreon and my channel members on YouTube. Your support is what makes this whole channel possible, and with that, let's get right into the video.
Dinosaurs and the Bible. What in the world do those two ideas have to do with each other?
Oh, they're both ancient and terrible sources for life advice.
Well, the Bible presents a very straightforward story of creation. God created the universe in 6 days. He made the swimming and flying animals on the 5th day of creation, and He made all land-living animals and humans on day 6.
That's only if you read Genesis chapter 1. It says that God made the birds first out of water. Then He made all the other animals out of the earth. And then finally He made humans, man and woman, together at the same time. But then in chapter 2, literally just the next page, God makes Adam first out of dust. Then He makes all of the animals, specifically every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, all together at the same time out of earth, no water involved. And then later He makes Eve using one of Adam's ribs, because I guess there wasn't enough dust left to make another human or something.
If that's true, then God created dinosaurs and humans on the very same day, since dinosaurs were land-living creatures. Most books and movies and articles that write about or teach things about dinosaurs hardly ever teach that dinosaurs and humans live together. In fact, they teach that dinosaurs and humans were separated by millions of years.
In all fairness, we only say that because it's true.
In fact, they teach that dinosaurs died out about 65 million years ago and that humans evolved in some shape, form, or fashion about 1 million years ago.
The time that he just gave for the extinction of the dinosaurs was pretty close. It was 66 million years, not 65 million years, but like everybody's kind of just used to saying 65, so it's not that big of a deal. I'm much more concerned with the fact that that asteroid just obliterated Georgia. That's way off from the Yucatan Peninsula where it actually landed. More importantly, however, the word human is kind of tricky here because it could be used to mean our species, Homo sapiens, or it could be used to mean any other member of the genus Homo. But no matter how Kyle was intending to use it there, he was wrong. Homo sapiens first appeared around 200,000 to 300,000 years ago, and the first members of the genus Homo, Homo habilis, first appeared around 2.4 to 2.6 million years ago. So at 1 million years, where Kyle's talking about here, you would have just had at least 2 species of human, Homo erectus and Homo heidelbergensis, sort of just doing stuff around Africa and Central Eurasia. This is what happens when you eschew science education to get your talking points from other creationists who also don't know what they're talking about.
And so most of the teaching on dinosaurs says that humans and dinosaurs were separated by over 60 million years.
Again, we're only saying that because it's obviously and demonstrably true. But then that only works if we're using the word dinosaur in the colloquial sense, which it seems to be that is what we're doing here. If we're actually talking in terms of cladistics, this whole situation gets a lot more interesting. You see, there's this clade, which is another way of saying monophyletic group, which is another way of saying a bunch of organisms that are all connected together by one common ancestor. And this clade is called Archosauria. Archosauria contains a tremendous amount of very diverse reptiles, but they can be roughly split into 2 major groups. On the one side, you've got the Pseudosuchians, which are all dead except for the crocodilians, which are still alive today. And on the other side, you've got the Ornithoderans. Within the Ornithoderans, there's a group called the Dinosaurs. Within the Dinosaurs, there's a group called the Theropods. And within the Theropods, there's a group called Aves, or as you know them, birds. So birds and crocodilians are the only living archosaurs, and birds specifically are the only living dinosaurs. All that is to say, humans have always lived around dinosaurs, even up to this very day. Look outside your window and you might see some dinosaurs right now. They just happen to not be the kind of dinosaurs that Kyle's talking about. Tasty, tasty dinosaurs.
Did God create dinosaurs and humans together on the sixth day of creation, or did they evolve millions of years apart?
Great question. Thank you for asking. They evolved millions of years apart. Are we done? Can that be the video?
When we look at all the evidence, we find that humans and dinosaurs were indeed together on the earth, just as the Bible says.
Well, that's not true at all. Why'd you even ask me if you weren't going to listen to what I say? He can't hear me.
First, there are numerous places in which humans of the past left depictions of dinosaurs.
There are also numerous places where humans have left depictions of dragons and fairies and cyclopses and other gods that you don't believe in. What are we doing?
On the Kachina Natural Bridge in Blanding, Utah, there's a wall carving that the Anasazi Indians put there that one evolutionist stated bears a startling resemblance to a dinosaur.
So here we have a petroglyph from ancient America, and one unnamed evolutionist says that it looks kind of like a dinosaur, therefore it must be exactly that. Great argument. Just two tiny problems. Number one is that image is heavily altered. The actual petroglyphs look like this. Kind of hard to see, right? So it's not uncommon for people, even actual archaeologists, to enhance those images to better show the outline of the petroglyphs. What is uncommon, however, is photoshopping out the massive triangular hump on the back of this so-called dinosaur. This is an image of the same petroglyph from Answers in Genesis, and even they were honest enough to include that part. And number two, that image doesn't distinguish between the part that was actually carved out by humans and the part that's just mud and mineral stains. When you factor all that in, the real petroglyph looks like this, with the dark part representing the actual carving. And if you ask me, that looks a lot more like an inner ear than a dinosaur. What Kyle and so many other creationists who talk about this stuff are exhibiting is pareidolia, which is the entirely human tendency to see patterns and faces and shapes in entirely meaningless images. We've all seen shapes in clouds or in a popcorn ceiling, and religious folks have been seeing the face of Jesus in wood shelves and the face of Mary in grilled cheese sandwiches for at least as long as the internet has existed. The fact is, humans are just really, really good at recognizing patterns. We're so good at it, in fact, that we recognize things as patterns that aren't actually patterns, which is why when you get training in science, you are taught to avoid things like that. But people like Kyle are just walking, talking manifestations of the unfortunately common cliche of a white Christian dude showing up to an archaeological site and declaring that everything he sees must be a representation of his biblical worldview, and couldn't possibly have anything to do with the thousands of years of human culture which developed in that region. I did zooarchaeology in grad school, which uses non-human animal remains to make sense of human ecology and whatnot, but even in my brief forays into regular archaeology, I got more than a little education into just how big and just how serious of a problem what Kyle is doing right now actually is. Seriously, show this video to your local anthropologist and tell me if I'm lying. The point is, even if this petroglyph did look like a dinosaur, it's about as much evidence for humans living alongside dinosaurs as these Old English marginalia are evidence of people fighting snails or playing trumpets with their butts. It's just art, dude. Find me a T-Rex fossil with a human skeleton inside and we'll talk.
Why would that be something that would startle someone who is an evolutionist? Well, because you're finding something that you didn't expect to find. It's startling, almost gives you a start, a carving of a dinosaur that Indians put there and showing that Indians could have seen those reptiles.
I don't appreciate you explaining the meaning of the word startling to me, not only because it's completely unnecessary, but also because it's going to make more people use the phrase give me a start, and nobody needs that. By the way, I'm ignoring the use of the word Indian here because while terms like Native American or just Native are generally considered to be more appropriate, I live in Oklahoma, which has a large Native population, and most of my Native friends, colleagues, and professors actually prefer the word Indian. In fact, while studying at Oklahoma State University, I did a ton of work with the Office of American Indians in Medicine and Science, or AIMS, and I still have my departmental backpack, which I carry proudly everywhere I go. This is the name of that university department, and it was started and is maintained by Native Americans. If you're Native American and you have a preference or an opinion about this that you want to share down in the comments, I would love to read it. But for everybody else, it's really important to remember that even if we're just talking about the federally recognized tribes, there are almost 600 of those. So no matter what word you use, you are talking about a massively diverse group of cultures and languages and peoples, every single individual amongst which are going to have a different opinion about this if they care at all. All that is to say, I don't use the word Indian myself, but I'm also not Native American, so I don't expect anybody to care about my preferences. So we're going to let this one slide.
In addition, there's a fossil of a dinosaur that resembles the carving of an Apatosaurus that was found only 45 miles away from the Kachina Natural Bridge.
Apatosauruses, or Apatosauri, I guess, if you want to sound cool, had a huge range that stretched across a massive swath of the western U.S., including parts of Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and even a little bit of Oklahoma. Kyle is trying to make it sound like the proximity of this petroglyph to this one particular fossil might indicate a causal relationship between the two, but at the end of the day, they could have found that same petroglyph anywhere across a span of hundreds of thousands of square miles, and it would have meant the same nothing. Except, I guess, that maybe the Anasazi might have lived in a different place than we expected them to, but still no freaking dinosaurs, dude.
In a temple in Cambodia. We know it was constructed in 1187 AD, and researchers found a carving that resembles a dinosaur there. In fact, one expert in Cambodian art stated that the carving is, and I quote, a very convincing representation of a Stegosaurus.
So again, we have another stone carving and another nameless person who Kyle claims is an expert, and that person says that this looks like a dinosaur, therefore that's what it is. Correlation isn't causation, so I'm not trying to take credit for this, but I do think it's a little funny that 3 years ago I released a video where I listened to Kyle misquoting evolution experts and looked up the original quotes and showed where he was lying about what they said. And now we have this video where he's still quoting what he says are experts, but he doesn't tell you who they are, and he doesn't give you enough of the quote to look it up. He says the experts agree with him, and you just have to take his word for it and don't fact check it. Were I a gambling man, I would bet money that if we could find that quote from this supposed ancient Cambodian art expert, it would read very differently than the way that Kyle is trying to frame it right now. But I'm not a gambling man, which is why I scoured the depths of the internet until I found the original quote in this 1999 travel book called Ancient Angkor by Michael Freeman and Claude Jacques, neither one of whom claimed to be an expert in Cambodian art. From inside the jacket, we can see that Michael Freeman is a photographer and Claude Jacques was an archaeologist who studied Cambodia and taught Southeast Asian history. Here on page 143, we see a picture of this carving, and on page 144, we see the whole quote. On the angles and corners of the porch are numerous small scenes and representations of animals, both real and mythical. Among the vertical strip of roundels, there is even a very convincing representation of a stegosaur. So what Kyle just presented to you as the formal academic opinion of an expert in regional artwork is actually just a fun little blurb pulled out of a travel guide from almost 3 decades ago. And again, Kyle is leaving out a ton of other information that would make it very easy for you to dismiss his claims. First of all, that isn't a convincing Stegosaurus at all. Even if we agree that those things across its back are plates, it has no thagomizer at the end of its tail, its head is massive and lacks a beak, and it has ears. Secondly, that carving is found among several other carvings of other animals, all of which have decorative shapes around them, which most sources that aren't 90s travel books say are meant to represent foliage and flowers. If you take those away and consider the rest of this animal's body, it's much more likely that this is a depiction of a Javan rhinoceros, which are native to that region, are much smaller than the rhinos in Africa, don't have big horns, and do have these long ears. That's an animal that we know the people who built this temple would have been familiar with, because we see other carvings of it at other temples in the same region. So it makes much more sense to say that this is just another carving of the same animal than it does to say that they saw a flippin' Stegosaurus and decided to make just one carving about it that looks different than all the other carvings at the same temple and also doesn't look like a Stegosaurus. Third, and most importantly, this entire argument that whatever ancient artwork sorta looks like a dinosaur, therefore it is one of the worst creationist arguments of all time, because it's next to impossible to rule out the possibility that they were actually trying to depict another animal, and they just did it poorly. Back in the days before cameras, if you wanted a picture of an exotic animal, you had to explain it to an artist who may have never seen or even conceived of such a thing, and then just hope for the best. And that's where we get such magnificent depictions of whales and snails and elephants and hippos and leopards and crocodiles and so much more. Not to mention the fact that the travel book that Kyle just tried to trick you with also says that some of the carvings around this temple are depictions of mythical creatures. In fact, if you look directly below this so-called Stegosaurus carving, you find this guy. What do you want to bet Kyle doesn't believe this lion goat man was bopping around Cambodia at the same time as the Stegosaurus? And back on the topic of Anasazi petroglyphs, what about this one? Do you think this humanoid creature with antennae and big eyes is hiding somewhere in the American Southwest? Or do you think that people just draw things sometimes? The point is, whenever somebody's presenting shocking and scientifically controversial information to you like this, it's important to ask yourself whether or not they're presenting it honestly. Is Kyle showing you the whole wall for context? Did he show you even one other carving? Is he comparing or even mentioning other hypotheses that might explain the existence of this one single small piece of artwork? Or did he just say, that kind of looks like a dinosaur, and that means everything you know about biology is wrong?
In Peru, ancient Indian burial stones have been found that have animals carved on them that match our understanding of dinosaurs.
The Ica stones were almost certainly carved by the farmer who claimed to have found them in some random cave on his property, as evidenced by the fact that he made a fortune selling them to gullible people all over the world, and also admitted to have carved several of them. They've never been dated. We still don't know where the original stones came from. They show depictions of dinosaurs that look the way we thought they looked at that time, but don't hold up to new reconstructions based on modern evidence. And they also show aliens flying in spaceships and doing brain transplants, which is why the medical doctor, who was not a paleontologist or archaeologist, left his career in medicine to buy thousands of them and open a museum about them in the 90s and claimed that they showed evidence of an ancient alien civilization that came to Earth and created humans millions of years ago. Funny how Kyle doesn't mention any of that.
Interestingly, these stones, they were found beginning in the 1930s, yet they had plant-eating dinosaurs depicted on them that had spikes on their backs. What's unusual about this is that we didn't know that those long-necked, long-tailed plant-eating dinosaurs had spikes on their back until we found fossilized skin in 1991.
What's really unusual about that is that you would say it, because the carving that you just showed on screen doesn't depict spikes on their backs. But even if it did, there are lots of lizards all around the world today that do have spikes on their backs, so there was plenty of inspiration for the artist to draw from. But you are more likely to believe an ancient alien conspiracy theory than believe that a con artist who conned people has conned you.
In addition, in Acambaro, Mexico, there have been hundreds of clay figurines that were unearthed in the 1940s that depicted dinosaurs in various different positions and actions.
Is this the whole video? Somebody had an imagination 100 years ago and that means that all modern science is wrong? Is this seriously the best that Kyle has to offer?
You add to this the fact that recent dinosaur fossils have been found that aren't complete fossils. They're actually bones that have some soft tissue in them. The bone has been mineralized, but the soft tissue has not. Partial red blood cells and collagen are still present in numerous dinosaur fossils. If these fossils were millions of years old, the fragile soft tissues, they would have long decayed and been mineralized, but they weren't.
Creationists love to talk about these soft tissues found in dinosaur fossils as if this is tantamount to like whole organs being found in these fossils. It's just a slightly stretchy bit of material that is insanely cool, but not at all impossible. But the most important thing to remember about this particular situation right here is that the paleontologist who first discovered these soft tissues is Dr. Mary Schweitzer. She was a young Earth creationist, and she got into science specifically to disprove evolution. And then she learned about it and understood the evidence and was forced to put aside her old beliefs as she grew as a scientist. She's still devoutly Christian, and she has said in interviews that she was shocked to learn that science isn't all about trying to disprove God the way that she was raised to believe, but that actually scientists work very hard to prove themselves wrong rather than trying to prove themselves right. She has also publicly stated multiple times that she absolutely hates it when people like Kyle do exactly what they're doing right now. Here's a quote from Dr. Schweitzer. "One thing that does bother me, though, is that young Earth creationists take my research and use it for their own message, and I think that they're misleading people about it. Pastors and evangelists who are in a position of leadership are doubly responsible for checking facts and getting things right, but they have misquoted me and misrepresented the data. They are looking at this research in terms of a false dichotomy between science versus faith, and that doesn't do anybody any favors." Kyle doesn't understand the science that he's talking about, and he doesn't know how to critically analyze the data that's in front of him, so he has no choice but to give you his uninformed interpretation of pop-sci clickbait and lie about what actual experts are saying.
Furthermore, the Bible is the most historically accurate record available to humans.
Do I really need to debunk that part, or even really address it? Do we need to go through all of the claims in the Bible that are historically inaccurate, scientifically impossible, lacking in evidence, or just plain wacky? Personally, I think it would be a much better use of our time to remind you that this video is sponsored by Brilliant. Hi there, my name is Forrest Valkai. I'm 32 years old, I'm 6'2". I'm constantly haunted by the memories of trivial mistakes I made over a decade ago, and I'm here to tell you about Brilliant. Brilliant is an everyday learning app that lets you dive into hands-on interactive lessons in math, science, programming, AI, and more, so that you can take charge of your education and learn what you want to learn at the pace that you want to learn it. Now I know what you're thinking, but Forrest, I haven't known what I was doing with my life since 2006. Guess what? Neither have I. I just keep learning science and talking about it on the internet. I don't even know where I am right now, but I know you need to try Brilliant. Brilliant has thousands of lessons in a wide variety of topics. The one thing that unites all of them is that you're never expected to just memorize answers. Rather, you learn by doing and by building good learning habits. Do you want to understand AI? So does AI. That's why you need to get there first. And you can do so by going to brilliant.org/forrestvalkai, clicking the link in the description, or scanning the QR code on the screen. Once you do, you'll get full access to everything Brilliant has to offer for 30 days, plus 20% off an annual subscription to Brilliant Premium. Look, nobody chose to be a part of this reality on purpose, all right? We were all born against our will, so the best thing we can do now is try to learn how to think scientifically. That's why Brilliant offers an amazingly fun scientific thinking course that helps you see the man behind the curtain. And by the man behind the curtain, I mean the laws and forces that govern your everyday life. And by the laws and forces that govern your everyday life, I mean... So get started today by going to brilliant.org/forrestvalkai, using the link in the description, or scanning the QR code on the screen. Remember, you'll get full access to all of Brilliant's lessons for a full 30 days, plus 20% off an annual subscription to Brilliant Premium when you use my link.
The Bible is the most historically accurate record available to humans. It says very plainly that God created everything in 6 days. And that would mean that dinosaurs and humans were created on the very same day.
It also very plainly says that a snake and a donkey and at least one grove of trees could all speak, and also that unicorns are real, and also that at one point all of the graves around Jerusalem opened up and that the dead walked out and met with people. It's like Aesop's fables, The Lord of the Rings, My Little Pony, and World War Z all rolled up into one, and the glue that holds them together is incest.
And the Bible also mentions an animal called a behemoth, and the text states that God made along with humans. It says that behemoth eats grass like an ox, See, now his strength is in his hips and his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. His bones are like beams of bronze. You read that in the book of Job, chapter 40, verses 15 and following.
Literally one chapter before that is where the Bible mentions unicorns, by the way. You can't have one without the other. That's why organizations like Answers in Genesis say that unicorns are indeed real, because, like Kyle, they believe that the Bible is the most accurate book in history, so any claims of misinterpretations or mistranslations would violate their faith by making the Bible flawed. I wonder if Kyle agrees.
Some people have suggested that, well, this has got to be an elephant or a hippopotamus. That doesn't make any sense. Elephants and hippopotamuses, they don't have huge tails that swing like a cedar. What would? A huge plant-eating dinosaur matches the description perfectly. So where did dinosaurs go? And the fact of the matter is many animals have gone extinct in the past. That's nothing new.
That's also the exact argument that Answers in Genesis uses for unicorns. That lots of animals have gone extinct in the past, and some of them were pretty crazy, and just because we haven't found evidence yet doesn't mean that you should doubt the Bible.
But the idea of an asteroid hitting the Yucatan Peninsula and causing catastrophic fires and volcanoes, killing the dinosaurs and them dying out 65 million years ago, it's got some problems. Crocodiles supposedly were alive then, and crocodiles are still with us. Sharks, turtles. Why those animals still living and not dinosaurs?
This man just discovered survivorship bias and didn't even notice. For clarity, the KT mass extinction wiped out 75 to 80% of all life on Earth. The non-avian dinosaurs are one very famous example of one type of animal that went extinct during this time, but they are nowhere near special in that.
You see, a better explanation for where dinosaurs went is available. Every time we find a huge dinosaur graveyard, they exist all over the world. What caused those huge graveyards? In virtually every single instance, it was a flood.
So you're telling me that fossils, which are most reliably produced by being rapidly covered in sediment, which is most often deposited by water, happen to be associated with places in which we find a lot of flooding? Huh. Surely that can't be a coincidence.
What flood would have had the power to kill thousands of dinosaurs and bury them in huge mass graveyards all over the world? The global flood of Noah? It provides a perfect answer.
It's like saying that we keep finding glaciers in places with extremely cold average temperatures, which means that Yetis must really like cold temperatures, and they're the ones building the glaciers. You already have the answer, dude. Animals need water to survive, so they're gonna be around water whenever they can be, and if they die there, they're more likely to get covered with mud, which means they're more likely to fossilize. Therefore, we find more fossils in areas which were ancient waterways. Why are we adding magic to a totally logical situation?
But if you're thinking through it, if the flood killed most of the dinosaurs, what about the ancient human artwork? Hey, didn't some people after the flood see them and carve them and depict them on cave walls or burial stones? That means some of the dinosaurs must have been on the ark. But how are you going to get these huge creatures on Noah's ark?
If the dumb thing I said a minute ago is true, and this dumb thing that I just said now is true, then how can this third dumb thing be true? Finally, someone's asking the real questions.
Well, the answer is much simpler than most people think. The largest dinosaur egg that we've ever found is about 24 inches long. Noah simply could have taken freshly hatched dinosaurs on the ark. That would have taken care of lots of the problems of the room that you would have needed to house them and the food that you would have needed to feed them.
And that's why we find fossils of every single kind of dinosaur and also every other kind of every other animal around the world right around Mount Ararat, which is where Noah's Ark is said to have settled. Except we don't see that at all, which is why it feels like we're watching a bad TED Talk from somebody whose entire reference section is a single chain email from 2003.
You know, when we get to look at all the evidence, we realize that when we really know about dinosaurs and all of the facts, those fit perfectly with the story of creation found in the Bible. On day 6, God created humans and all land animals, including dinosaurs.
So, to recap, we have a pictograph of a swoopy spiral, a carving of a rhinoceros, some obviously fraudulent alien rocks, a clay monstrosity, and the research of a scientist who vehemently disagrees with everything in this video. And when you put all that together, it means that zombie apocalypse Animal Farm is real, and that's why you can't be gay. Makes sense if you're Kyle, I guess. Overall, I give this video a science teacher challenge level 2 out of 10. That part about the soft tissue and fossils is still relatively new science that does tend to trip people up, but other than that, the entire video was like watching a toddler try to make a smoothie. It's gross, and it's messy, and it's annoying, and somehow he still seems proud of it, but I don't want it. Or to put it in the words that I started this series with 3 years ago, overall, bad. Just real bad. You did a bad job, Kyle. And with that, I'm Forrest Valkai. Thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, and all the other stuff you do here on YouTube. Please exit through the gift shop, pick up one of these sweet t-shirts. Have an awesome rest of your day, and never stop learning. Bye-bye.
Dinosaurs.